Welcome to the Southern Housing Podcast. Today we're diving into a topic that's so important but often overlooked, safeguarding. Specifically, safeguarding in housing associations. That's right, not schools or care homes, housing associations. So we're here chatting with Brea, Kayleigh and Grace from our safeguarding team about how they're trying to build a safeguarding culture that challenges bias and encourages curiosity. So to start off with, Brea, tell us, what is safeguarding?
So safeguarding in its most basic form means protecting people or the most vulnerable people in society from abuse, neglect or harm.
So tell us a little bit about the kind of cases that are coming into Southern Housing and the sort of numbers that you're seeing as well.
Mm-hmm. So since the introduction of the safeguarding team and us simplifying reporting lines to the team, if you like, so everyone in the business can report it directly from their phone and customers can ring in, we've seen an 83% increase in referrals. So the team sit on around 100 cases a month that they get through. So not all of them will go to the local authority for a referral. It might be that initially we ask some, of our colleagues to go and do a welfare check, or we might, as will be spoken about in this podcast, we might also refer to other support, so our community investment teams, financial inclusion teams, but we see about a 60-40 split. So 60 will go to the local authority and we will make that referral, and then say 40% will sit with other teams, or we might actually just be able to signpost them to some other really more appropriate services or national charities, local community groups. Our biggest area of referrals that we see as a team are domestic abuse concerns, self-neglect and financial abuse. But if you think about the services in which we deliver as a housing provider, all of those happen within the home. So that's why we would see that, it's not uncommon that we would see those abuse types. Ones that we don't necessarily see many of are modern slavery and discriminatory abuse cases. However, there is a rise on modern slavery cases within the last 3 years because cuckooing is under that umbrella. Cuckooing comes from the term, the cuckoo's nest. So it's essentially where a vulnerable person's, or any person really, so more so though potentially people who have a learning disability, may have substance misuse issues or mental health, property is taken over by criminal gangs to utilise the property to sell drugs, to use it for criminal activity or criminal behaviour, and normally the person whose home it is pushed out, or they are isolated from their own home in order for that to happen, and that has a really wide impact on the community because of the footfall of people going. It also links into quite severe antisocial behaviour for other residents. So if anyone ever has any concerns around that, report those through to us, because we would normally do that with a two-pronged approach. So our antisocial behaviour team would get involved in that. We would work really closely with our colleagues in the police, as well as safeguarding the individuals whose home it is and who's been affected.
How would a resident know that something that they're worried about is specifically a safeguarding concern?
Sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes you can't take things as face value. You could go in and it could be really obvious, a really unkempt home, really dirty, poor living conditions. Sometimes it's as simple as a contractor going in and seeing something they're not comfortable with. That could be something so minor like a child exposing themselves, and that's easy enough for someone to say, well, that child might be potty training, but actually it's deeper than that, and you know, we need to look at the bigger picture.
It's about having that sort of professional curiosity, I
Yes.
guess, isn't it? Like you
Yes.
say, it's not going in and just saying,
No.
we've got to do a repair, we'll do it, it's done.
Mhm.
It's kind of looking a little bit deeper, I guess. So what happens when someone reports a safeguarding concern to us? What's the process?
So everything will come through via Safety Hub. I will pick that up. I will always look first onto the account to see if we've had any previous welfare concerns. I also try and just get a basic picture of the resident, see if there's any sort of rent arrears, like I say, previous welfare. I will also contact the referrer to see if they have any further information regarding it. You know, was consent given? And obviously go from there. I now call the residents just to find out, just again, professional curiosity, just to see how everything is and what needs to be done. Because sometimes it can be like an in-house, you know, welfare visit. You know, do they need extra help with their benefits? Is it more of a financial inclusion? If it needs to be dealt with by the safeguarding team, then we will get it sent across or uploaded onto our system, and then one of the officers will make contact with the resident and get them referred across to the local authorities.
So there's been a lot of changes in safeguarding at Southern Housing since merger. What is it that you're hoping to achieve now with this new team and new procedure in place?
Yeah, so it's very complex when you bring two organisations together that done things very differently. And one thing I think that aligns with our values is, you know, promoting safer environments for people, creating communities that people are proud to live. So that's really underpins what safeguarding is as well. So we felt that it was really important to introduce a specialist team that can be responsive to those concerns, that can be trained in safeguarding to a deeper level. So before, maybe where we're not saying it's not everyone's responsibility, but maybe it was confusing what people's roles and responsibilities were in the process. Now the team can be directly contacted. We can have a best practice approach. We can make sure that we're contacting every resident. We can make sure that we're making safeguarding personal. We can make bespoke and person-centred safety plans. We can signpost people to those specialist services that are out there to support them. So I guess what we want to continue to do is embed our new ways of working, promote the safeguarding team, make sure that residents know that if something doesn't feel right, they can give us a call, they can speak to us about that. And more importantly, it's about changing the landscape for also people that work on our behalf and then recognising their role in this process, particularly our contractors. You know, they are the eyes and ears. They're going into our homes probably more regularly than, let's say, housing officers or income officers daily. You know, we have contractors probably go into hundreds of homes. So it's really about building awareness within contract services, letting them know how they can help us and contact our team as well, because we are reliant on people to raise those concerns to us. And once we have those concerns, and as a team, we can work together with our local authority partners or specialist services to ultimately reduce harm and keep people safe.
So how are we doing that? How are we equipping contractors and, as you say, frontline housing teams, colleagues who may not necessarily be safeguarding minded? How are we equipping them to sort of spot signs and to be curious?
I always say, with regards, I had a contractor the other day, and again, I think it's having that professional curiosity. You know, I always say if something doesn't seem right or feel right to you, then just report it. There's no harm in reporting. If nothing comes out of it, you've still, you know, done the best for that resident as such. You know, there was someone the other day, for instance, that, you know, had called about a blocked toilet, and when he went into the property, you just think a basic, you know, blocked toilet's going to be in and out within an hour. Ended up being a massive hoarding case. They'd had the water stop clock turned off. Nobody had been in the property for over 6 years. There was a real hoarding issue going on, and young children in the property as well. So again, it's just having that, like we've just said, professional curiosity.
Absolutely. So what tools do you think we would need to effectively safeguard our residents?
So the safeguarding team, since we've been together, have designed Safety Hub, which Grace earlier spoke about, which is where if anyone's got any safeguarding concerns they want to bring to the safeguarding team's attention, it will be logged on there. All contractors, staff, anyone can have access to that to make those reports. I think, you know, that's the initial tool you need, but alongside that, I think to do the job well, you know, we need to use risk assessments, you know, again, professional curiosity. I think in this role, sometimes we are faced with asking difficult questions, you know, and challenging people, not just residents, but sometimes you're challenging what, you know, social services are saying. We're challenging decisions that they make on why we think it's the wrong decision. You know, I think heart values comes into a lot of everything we do. Being honest with residents, managing expectations, you know, and then just making sure we work within the values and knowing our policies and procedures to make sure we do the job correctly, to ensure not only the safety of our residents, but, you know, the reputation of our business should anything ever go to a serious case review.
And you touched just then on about working with social services. So do you think, obviously a lot of safeguarding is multi-agency work, you're working with other partners, but do you think the role of housing associations is sort of understood, that we are a key partner in that with the agencies?
I do think we're often overlooked. We are quite regularly, I know we're finding out more and more, the last agency to find out about cases, particularly around children. I think adults, they're more keen to get us involved because it normally requires a move because they're not suitably accommodated, whereas with children it's not normally about the accommodation, it's the living conditions that they're living in, or, you know, what they're witnessing from their elders. But yeah, talking about multi-agency working, I think it's critical in safeguarding because it promotes comprehensive understanding of both children and adults' vulnerable situations, and it just leads to more effective interventions. You know, you've got the holistic assessment from all agencies, early intervention gets done, findings and evidence as early as possible rather than letting it dragging out, you know, improved information sharing. Me and Grace regularly work at the Community Safety Unit in Swale, and within that you've got the local authorities safeguarding from the local council, you've got Kent Police, so you know I think it builds them relationships to get good working relationships and getting answers a lot quicker than those you don't know, you know.
And just to support what Kayleigh said there, we can give just a little bit more insight into what's happening under the roof, whereas a lot of children in need meetings or safeguarding planning meetings are done away from the home and no one's got their eyes behind the front door. So involving us in that process and ensuring that we are a key partner within those meetings means that we can actually give a little bit more of a story about what's happening behind the door, because, you know, we were literally having a conversation this morning that whilst someone might ring in be concerned about their neighbour, or, you know, someone's calling in themselves about something that they're worried about, if we can get behind the door someone's attitude, their environment, you know, building a trusting relationship, it gives you it builds a better relationship to empower them to work with you to get that support.
And it's a unique position that we're in there, isn't it, to have
Absolutely.
that access to that, like you say, which the other agencies just don't.
Yeah, for sure.
So robust safeguarding practices obviously go beyond regulatory and legal compliance. They build trust and create safer communities. So how do you think we can build a positive safeguarding culture at Southern Housing?
Yeah, so it, as you say, it goes beyond just a policy and procedure. It's, you know, like anything, it needs to be championed and promoted from the top, regardless of your role within the organisation, you know, from the CEO to our ground maintenance estate care operatives. Everyone has a role to play, everyone needs to understand that. So by building a safer culture, it's important to always have an attitude of it is happening here rather than it could, because if we say it could happen, we could become complacent, whereas if we say it is happening here, we're always trying to improve and to change our ways of working to ensure that we're getting better outcomes for residents. It's about having a really robust training plan, so everyone in the business, you know, even if you are in a back office role and you might not be customer facing, we're still giving you an awareness so that if you overheard something, or, you know, even supporting your own colleagues who might find themselves in a situation where they need to be safeguarded, being confident and allowing people to, you know, even between teams, positively challenge one another. I think that's always good. It's about making sure that we promote the rights of individuals. So, you know, no one in life should ever feel at risk or, you know, feel as though they're being harmed or abused or neglected. If we can make sure that we're having open and honest conversations about safeguarding, you know, we're not shying away from the fact that some of those conversations are going to be difficult, and also, and most importantly, some of the decisions that we make about safeguarding, we're not going to be liked, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. You know, it ultimately, the reason that we are doing this is because we feel strongly enough that with the right help, support and partnership, we can change someone's life for the better.
It's a difficult role for you guys, and you're handling situations that are sensitive, that might be upsetting, that are difficult. So I suppose it's, yeah, on a personal level and a professional level, how you get through that and what support there is.
We're a very close team to start with, and, you know, we've got great support from Brea and Kayleigh as well. And I think we always make sure that we talk to each other. We always have our clinical supervision meetings as well. That's been really helpful, and we all just talk and offload on there, because again, you know, it can be difficult at times, but I feel, and not speaking on behalf of the officers, but, you know, once you've raised the case and you've done what you can, you'd also get a great satisfaction from it as well, that you've done everything you can for that resident. And so it's as sad as sometimes the situation is, you also feel that you've, you know, that may not have been identified before, and now that it has, and sometimes you can actually think this is actually going to be really positive for the resident. But again, we will always message each other to make sure we're all okay. Like I explained, great support from managers. We have our clinical supervision. So yeah, I find it quite a rewarding job. Yes, challenging at times, but very rewarding as well.
Southern Housing has invested in independent clinical supervision for the safeguarding team. Really shows how they want this team to evolve and grow and understand how important it is, because normally that's only a requirement of social workers. But we've worked with our charity Fresh Visions, and they offer independent clinical supervision to all of the safeguarding team for them to go to and talk through cases. And it's an opportunity, you know, there's an escalation procedure within the supervision, that if things are, let's say, a procedural issue or a systematic issue that we need to sort out because it's going to keep on coming up, then that's escalated to myself, and we can review policies and procedures to ensure that things like that don't happen again.
And you mentioned about it being a rewarding role. Are there any sort of case studies, examples that spring to mind, or memorable situations that you've dealt with over the years that sort of have stayed with you?
Obviously, I only joined the team in February, but being a safeguarding champion, and I was in response for 5 years, there's been many a times that we've had, you know, outcomes, you know, with people that, especially with rent arrears, you know, that have been in real upset and, you know, embarrassed to call up and get that sorted. And, you know, we've helped the resident in every way that we can there, and obviously we can get the funds sometimes across and get their rent paid off. Another one for me is also having, you know, if a resident's had 2 or 3 food bank vouchers, you know, the reason behind, you know, why they've had to use that 2 or 3 times, especially during COVID, things like that did increase. Again, we can refer over to financial inclusion team to make sure they're getting all the benefits that are needed. Because again, some people don't always have the capacity to do the forms and stuff to do all of that. But yeah, it's definitely a rewarding when you can turn around and say you've really helped, a resident and they've the best possible outcome.
You mentioned about the limitations, and I guess another one of those limitations is consent.
Mm-hmm.
So that obviously, I don't think people always understand the process of that. Could you explain a bit about that?
Yes, sure. So if someone's deemed to have capacity and you can identify that they're struggling, if they decline any support, we're limited on what we can do. We can obviously always make a referral, but the first thing adult social services will ask you is, do they have capacity? Yes. Are they aware of this referral? Yes. Do they consent? No. Then we're limited on what we can do. If someone has capacity, declines any intervention, we can't do any more than offer, and remind them that if they change their mind, come back to us. Obviously, when it comes to children, it's not always, it's rare the parents are going to say, yeah, report me to social services. We always have to make it known, and that's what Brea was touching on earlier, that, we're going to upset some people sometimes. They're not going to agree with the decisions that we have to make, but ultimately we've got a duty of care. We don't have parental control over then children don't always have a voice, especially the younger ones, and they may not know that they're being neglected because they don't know any different. The parents, it could be a lifestyle choice, but it's not for those children, and that's what you've got to think about. And a lot of the reports now that come from the likes of social services and the minutes of the meetings, and they'll come to us in, the children's voices. What do the children want? And it'll be spoken about as if it was from the child, and I think that's important to understand what the children
And I think, just to add to that, it's about, we are just a referrer, Yes, the consequences or the example that Kayleigh gives is maybe a worst case scenario, but the local authority would need to carry out a vigorous assessment of the needs of the whole family, to understand and to make those decisions, and they have to go to court in order to do that. And that, I know we've spoken about this again as well, the professional curiosity comes into it. So it's about understanding what's changed for this family, why are they currently unable to maybe understand the whole needs of the family makeup or the environment. Is there more going on? Is it because they are in a state of depression? Have they developed, a mental health condition? Is it that they've been experiencing domestic abuse? It's about looking at it, from a really holistic a picture. Again, even if someone has, or we must always presume capacity, we also have to look at, is someone of a capacitating mind really understanding what's happening to them? So it might be that they are experiencing things that actually is impacting their ability to understand or to make that choice. It could be that they're in complete fear of their situation, so that they wouldn't maybe be able to express the want anyway because of the fear of the repercussions, or maybe even shame. There's a lot of shame that's associated to safeguarding. So,
and I think also, not to cut in, is also embarrassment. I've got an example of when I was in response and I had a lady call me, and it was a very simple call. It was something, but I noticed during the call she was asking some sort of strange questions. Not strange, but how's the weather where you are, and what have you been up to? Really wanted to prolong the conversation. And I was like, yeah, no, everything's fine. And I'd asked her on 3 separate occasions, is everything okay? Is there anything you need, or anything you'd like to talk about, anything else? And I think it was about after 18 minutes being on the phone, she actually admitted to me that she was hiding in a closet away from her husband and was receiving quite severe domestic abuse. With that, I then had my manager on the phone, and we called 999, and we got her removed from the property straight away. And again, another example come back to me was, I think my, not love of safeguarding, that's the wrong word, my passion for safeguarding started when I worked in a previous environment, and I'll always remember it. And I was serving some school dinners, and a little boy come up to me, and he said, Miss, can I have 2 slices of pizza? And I said, well, no, you can only have 1, can't you? You know, everybody's got to have. And he said, but Miss, I haven't eaten since Friday. And I remember standing there and even talking about it, I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck come up. And straight away, and I didn't want to make a big scene. I didn't want to make him feel embarrassed. I was very, oh, okay. And I said, well, there you go. And I called him the wrong name because I'll be honest, I didn't know every child's name. And I said, well, there you go, Patrick. And he was like, no, my name's Thomas. And I said, well, there you go, Thomas. That'll keep you big and strong. I said, if there's any leftovers, I'll bring them over. And I remember watching him, because again, took it on face value. He was only around about 5 or 6. And I watched this little boy go over to his table and eat this slice of pizza. Like within seconds, he wolfed this bit of pizza down. So I went and spoke to the head, and I said, I have real concerns. I said, I've got his age, I've got his class. And we contacted the parents, and it was actually a really sad situation that the husband actually sadly passed away, and the mum had a mental breakdown because she just couldn't afford anything. And again, just a normal family working, and that's what I mean, how situations for all of us can change so rapidly, and the family broke down. And then after what had happened, we got the mum in, and actually we got some really good support and that in place. So it ends up being a really happy ending with that, you know, because she did feel a lot of shame, and she was struggling herself because she'd just lost her partner. And, you know, yeah, it was a really good story at the end of it, because we did, apart from obviously, but we did get the support and that she needed.
And I expect situations like that could be on the rise as well with the cost of living
100%,
crisis.
yeah. Again, when I started in response, I would do probably 1 a week, food bank vouchers. Doing 5, 6 a week now. So.
Yeah, and I think we have seen, you know, since COVID and since, you know, the economic operating environment that, you know, all of us are in, regardless of your situation, you know, times are really difficult, aren't they, financially? We've seen a huge increase in safeguarding referrals around financial abuse, particularly, you know, really sadly, within family situations. So within our, say, residents who live in independent living accommodation, supporting their children who have younger families. So that misuse really of maybe their lasting power of attorney, and utilise it, or taking money from relatives when they could be really struggling. And it, you know, again, it's not necessarily something that they would want to do either, but it's because of the situation that they're in. And one thing we haven't yet said is that, you know, nearly all safeguarding cases, abusers or the people who are perpetrating the harm are known to the person. They're not strangers on the street. You know, abuse is built on power and control and trusting relationships. So sometimes the dynamic in which these situations occur can be that, you know, it might be family members, and so imagine how hard that must be for people to come forward and say, you know, this is the situation I'm in, and sadly I know the person that's doing this to me.
Again, it's that feeling of shame and guilt and embarrassment, isn't it, that we need to overcome. And it must be so difficult to, so like some of those examples you've just given, it must be really difficult to be in the thick of it, and also those times when maybe you can't help people or you don't get the outcomes that you want. It must be so difficult. So what keeps you going and what keeps you motivated?
I think in this job you have to have the mindset of wanting to help someone. You can't come into this job without giving genuine empathy and care.
Compassion, and knowing, like you say, everything that we know, that once we've referred it over, or what we've done, we have done the absolute best that we can for our resident. Like we say, even doing like a check-in, and, you know, is there any more that can be done?
We still get frustrated with other agencies. Like we want to do more. We know more can be done, but our hands are tied. It's like, you know, we often say to each other, we're not the full emergency service.
Yeah.
There's only so much we can do. and it is hard, and I think we all lean on each other at times when we're feeling frustrated, and that's what's great in the team, because we all kind of feel it at different times. I think, like, you know, you could have some really intense stuff while someone else hasn't, and it's good to offload and get a second opinion. Like, quite regularly, we all know what we need to do, or if we've done it all, but you just say, do you think there's anything else I could do? And I just think, yeah, I think we're all really good at that.
Yeah, and I think what keeps me going is that we're never going to eliminate abuse and neglect, but if we all work together, we can empower people to know that there can be a better life for them at the end. And sometimes it might need us to support them and empower them maybe 5 or 6 times. But yeah, we can make a change. Small changes can actually have a massive impact on an individual's lives. So it needs people as well to be champions. It needs people to say, you know, enough is enough, come on, let's work together, let's do this, you know, we're stronger together. If we didn't have people like Kayleigh, Grace, myself and everyone that's in the safeguarding team, then nothing would ever change. So yes, it feels sometimes like a really long uphill battle, but it's because you do still get those elements of breakthrough, and seeing the changes that you do make to people's situations is incredibly rewarding. So when you know that you can do that, you've just got to work with other people, empower the person themselves to make those changes, then things can look, you know, more positive for everyone.
And finally then, what should a resident do if they are needing support themselves, or if they want to raise a concern about something else? What are the steps that they should take?
So I think it's, if someone is in immediate danger or they are witnessing harm, they must always call 999, because ultimately those individuals need the support there and then. They can contact our safeguarding team directly, so we've got a hotline now, so if you call our safeguarding team, you'll speak to lovely Grace. She's going to ask you a few questions. She's going to ask you what you're concerned about. She might be asking you for some information around what's going on, who the people are, the address, that sort of thing. And then Grace will pass that information on to a safeguarding officer, and they will contact. You can, if you're already on the phone to our service centre, if you want to contact them, you know, or tell them about the concern, they will have training and they will report it internally to the team as well. But if you think, I don't want to report this to Southern Housing, but I am still really concerned, you can contact every local authority has a safeguarding team. You can cut us out if you want. Ultimately, we are the middleman. So if you want to go to your local authority safeguarding team for children or adults, give them a call, talk about your concern. One thing that is probably really important to say is that we might not call you back as the person that's making that referral, nor might the local authority, but everything will be dealt with. So every concern that comes in will be looked at, will be assessed, and will be dealt with.
Thank you so much, guys, for joining us to talk about safeguarding at Southern Housing, and keep listening to our podcast.
With everything